Hello. So this week, what the Akashic Records are sharing is whatever you do it with conviction, the belief that it can be done. And this is a throwback. This is something that they've shared with me, shared with us. I think it's even been on record time from years ago. So we're gonna dip into this once again, and I'm sure there will be something new here, a different flavor to this than last time. Whatever you do it with conviction, the belief that it can be done. Essentially, what the records are inviting us, almost like invoking us, is don't do anything half-assed. At least in the places it counts. The places that you want to show up, right? There's obligations and things, that you might just show up to it, get it done, whatever, and your whole self might not be into it, right? That's not really what they're talking about here. In the places that you're showing up from your own desire, your own will, your own freedom, right? Your free will. In those places, in those facets of life, in those endeavors, with those intentions, whatever you do there, in those places, do it with conviction, with the belief that it can be done. And I know that conviction might be a dicey word for some folks. And so the reason that this last piece is attached to it is because that's the framework, the definition that we're working with right now. So if that word kind of means other things to you, I invite you to, for this moment, understand that the way I'm using it is conviction is being the belief that something can be done. So what does this mean? This can kind of unfold and open up so much depending on how you kind of look at this. And the records are acknowledging that it would be easy to almost drop into delusion with this, right? Of just like almost like delusional optimism, like I think I can, right? And that's, maybe that's part of it. And in some moments that really serves. So by no means am I dismissing that as bad, right? It can be really supportive sometimes to just have this kind of like delusional optimism to keep going. And at the same time, there's a really grounded kind of piece to this, right? It's almost easy to think that conviction, right, to believe that something can be done means like this whole thing. It's almost like, oh, like I can achieve a miracle. And what they're inviting us to look at is scope, the scope of what you're doing. And that's where you can bring in some nuance, and you can find where you sit in your own spectrum of, right, delusional optimism. I feel like delusion, it sounds kind of bad, but this like really robust, lush optimism, and more of a reality kind of realist's perspective, or even a pessimist's perspective of like, this is too big, right? So it's easy to think that conviction means that you have to be extremely optimistic that, yeah, it can be done. I can do anything. It can happen. I'm gonna make it happen. And there's pros and cons to that. And it can also be, though, like without the conviction, it can become easy to give up and think this is way too big. I can't do it. And you are lacking the belief that it can be done. And so what they're inviting with this is, can you find the scope, the appropriate scope for what you can actually do? And the reason that they're kind of bringing our attention to the scope, why it's so important to notice this and to be in contact with your own scope, is because so many of our desires, so much of our reality, so much of the problems that we're in contact with in this moment in time on this planet, right? With the climate, with the politics, with the violence, with everything that's going on. So much, all of the systems, right? There's injustice rampant around us at all times, right? Right now, this is a potent time. And so it can be easy to think, I can't do anything. This is too big. This is too big. I'm just one person. And what they're asking us, they're not saying, have the conviction to think that you can resolve these huge paradigms in your lifetime. You don't have to be that optimistic. You don't have to have that much conviction, right? Because that would be hard to muster and sustain, because that is really big. That might not actually happen. Maybe that's not a realistic point of view. But you also don't have to drop into the other end of the spectrum of like, this is too big, I'm not going to do anything. I can't do anything at all. And if you can come into the middle with this, it's like, yeah, in your lifetime, you might not see some of these problems or these issues or these realities resolved. Ouch. Painful. What a painful reality check. In your lifetime, the things that you wish to see, you might not get to see. You might not get to see, the resolution of patriarchy. You might not get to see the solution of capitalism. You might not get to see the resolution of all the wars that are happening. And that's a painful thing to come into contact with. That may or may not be true. But what they're inviting us to recognize, it's not just to bum us out, right? Is that they want to acknowledge that the things that we might feel inspired to work towards, the visions, the hopeful futures we might be inspired to work towards, the problems that we're working to resolve, they go back much, much farther than us. And they might extend the resolution, the path to resolution might extend much, much beyond us, right? So the scope of what we can do is connected to the scope of our lifetime. And so when they say, whatever you do, do it with the conviction that it can be done, they're not saying you have to think that you can resolve these huge things in just your lifetime, in the scope of your lifetime, but you can contribute to the vision and the reality that you deeply desire to see. So can you hold the conviction that your contribution will support the fruition of your desire, whether or not you see it come to life? And maybe that is difficult. And they're acknowledging that, right? How can you continue to stay motivated, to have conviction around something that you might never live to see come into reality? It can easily become and feel pointless, right? But that's the invitation, and they're inviting you to dig down into the pleasure of the process, the fulfillment, the satisfaction that is available to you in the process. And let that sustain your conviction to keep going as a contributor of many, one of many contributors that are working within their own scope, within their own skill, within their own capacity to serve this desired shared vision. So there's not an answer to this, but there's an invitation. It's almost like they're asking us, can you do this? Can you please show up with conviction? Even though this problem, the scope of these realities are bigger than the scope of you, can you still show up with your conviction around your unique contribution? And that's not easy. But that's what they're asking of us, for those that feel called, for those that feel motivated by a desire to see a better world. Can you muster up your conviction to contribute? So that's where I'm going to leave you for today. And I know that conviction is not easy to sustain. And so I want to note that if you're feeling like your conviction, your flame, your drive has fizzled out a little bit, has burned out, that's also okay. And I know that you're doing your best. So if you feel like the conviction is not there, it's burned out, then there's also permission in this to take time to rest, to resource, to do what you need to for that flame to be rekindled. Okay. I'm wishing you well until next time. Namaste.